Hope of brunch chats. We're here from 10 a.m. to 11 today. I'm still waiting for the chat to appear. Hopefully everything is fine. I'm here. Yes, it's working. That's fantastic. Welcome everyone. So I'm here with Big Maj, Bowler Hatman, and Political X. We're going to talk about Ukraine today. Yeah, good man. He has his hat. He has his attire. Fantastic. So this is going to be probably, hopefully, every week. Every Sunday at this time we're gonna have a chat with some different guests on. We're gonna talk about different things. Obviously, the big issue of the day is Ukraine. We don't really have any particular format, but we're just gonna have a bit of back and forth, I think, on what's happening. So, guys, what do you think is? I don't know. What do you think the end game here is with Ukraine? Anyone want to jump in?
It's a big question to start off with as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Actually, sorry, just before, guys, if anyone wants to send us a super chat, we're going to donate those to charity after the show. It'll take a few days for us to have all the information from YouTube, but definitely. Somebody's asking why I don't have a tricorn. It's beyond my reach at the moment. I wasn't expecting hats today, so. Thanks, Valerio. Thank you so much, Valerio, for that super chat. Hi, all. Have a lovely Sunday. Have a lovely Sunday to you, Valerio, too. Sorry, Political X, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Endgame then for Ukraine or for Russia? I guess you've got to split it into two, really, and the West. I mean, if we're going to go for it, we might as well start off with Putin. What's Putin's point in all of this? Like, invading the Ukraine, from my perspective of a military standpoint, has little to no logical sense unless he can knock them out and put in a puppet government. And even then, he's got to suppress a population that are renowned to be pretty fierce. I think there were some of the combat units from Ukraine in World War II were considered some of the strongest units in the World War II era from the Soviet perspective. So it's like he's really poking a hornet's nest there, and they're filled with guns, weapons, and everything else. So I don't get an end game. I think Big Madge, I was talking to you about this the other day, and I wonder if it's like a stepping stone to going into the rest of Europe, because that's the only thing that makes any logical sense to me, unless he can take the sanctions. I don't know what anyone else thinks on that.
We've got again the situation is, you're right, is so big. And you've got the worrying fact that Russia has mobilized. That's a big worrying thing, because you consider the fact that you look at all this buildup, and initially as the troops were arriving at the border, all the experts and all the things were saying, currently doesn't have enough troops to do it. Oh, now he's got enough troops to do it. And it's still that fascinating question of he can invade Ukraine, and then there's holding Ukraine.
Yeah.
As you said, probably setting up a puppet government. We are probably going to see insurgencies rising up throughout all of this. The will of the people to fight, of the people in Ukraine, is so strong right now. You can see videos of like entire groups of people making Molotov cocktails, like grinding up the plastic styrofoam, shoving them in the bottle so that they stick more to armored vehicles. And Putin will come out and say, or again, there are probably going to be people who are standing for Russia in chat. I'm pretty sure those people will probably turn up soon. But these people are doing this of their own free will. They are determined to defend their democratic rights, their democratic country that they have elected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the other side you have, and I've seen numerous videos and clips online of Russian soldiers who are just completely demoralized. They were expecting to roll in and be treated as heroes, welcomed as heroes with flowers or whatever, and they are completely demoralized. And they've also, if you look at some of the equipment they've been using, a lot of the equipment is old Soviet stuff. Broken down, and I was following somebody on Twitter about this, where you have really untrained, or extremely untrained soldiers going in and in the first wave, and they're not getting out of their vehicles. They're not dealing with these rocket attacks, on their armored vehicles, and they're just getting completely destroyed, and that's demoralizing as well. So the idea but as you said, there are videos online of members of the public walking up to these armored vehicles and telling the soldiers, "What the hell are you doing here? Go back to Russia. You have no reason to be here."
Yeah.
I just want to say thanks to the others for the super chats. Thanks so much to Conservator, Cahill, and Chris. Great, thank you so much.
So, what do you all think about Putin's? Why is he doing it? Is it to push back? Is it to take over? Can he? And I guess he's a character that works on a multi-level system. It's not as straightforward. He's like playing 3D chess from Star Trek. It's on different levels, and I think a lot of people are just looking at it as a simple chess game of he wants that, but he's never operated like that. He's always operated on another level, and I know from security reports and from chats from senior people that I've had, he has definitely come across as someone that he could go into a meeting and say one thing, leave the meeting and go and say and order something completely different. And you're sort of going, right, so he's paranoid, he's delusional. I mean, this is, as the MP said, full tonto. So I don't see how, if I can't see why there's a military advantage to taking Ukraine and trying to hold it for essentially eternity, why do it?
I think he's seen something. I think he has seen some sort of advantage. He must perceive that there must have been some sort of weakness in the West, and whether this was brought on by the withdrawal from Afghanistan by the US, or maybe it'll be something else entirely completely different. The only real person who could answer that really is Putin at this point.
But also, I think the way he saw our reaction to Crimea, there was no real response from the West. And I think he believed, oh, well, I'll do the same again with Ukraine, and there'll be no response from the West. And in a sense, if you look at what's been happening over the last number of years, we've been extremely divided. We haven't been united in our response to him. And he probably expected, okay, I'll march into Ukraine. There'll be a bit of resistance. I'll put in a puppet. The West will flail about a bit, and then that'll be it. And then it'll be moving on to the next, maybe Moldova or maybe even Romania. But certainly the states around, like Estonia and maybe Latvia as well. I think that was always his goal. So get into Ukraine, put in a puppet. The West will complain for a couple of weeks, and then we'll move on to something else. But he definitely miscalculated that.
From a military point of view, the next target I would certainly worry about if Ukraine did fall would certainly be the Baltic states, so Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, because obviously you've got Kaliningrad and then you've got Belarus, and there's literally this tiny gap called the Silesia Gap or something like that.
Yeah,
where it is this tiny crossing point between essentially Poland and Lithuania. And if, again, as we are seeing now, military cooperation from Belarus in this Ukraine invasion, if they were to do that, they could isolate the land route to those three countries and invade. That's why we've seen NATO troops head to those three countries recently, because that's probably the next big worry point.
He's already made threats to Finland and Sweden if they join NATO, and you're a bit like, wow. And it seems like he's going for historic sites or countries that are connected to Russia. I mean, Russia and Finland have been knocking bricks out of each other for centuries.
And the last time it didn't go very well.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah. The Finns and the snow didn't exactly do well for the Russian tech at the time, if I remember. And it's interesting in the fact that he he must have calculated all of this. In terms of even making that threat, that must have been calculated to an extent. This is what I do to the Ukraine. You'll be next if you try and join NATO or the EU. I mean, and it's interesting as well, because you were talking about the timing. So we've just had Brexit. There's a lot of dodgy stuff connected to Russia with that. That's knocked the economy of Europe and Britain. Trump's caused anarchy in the US and split the country. So you're going...
I'll just nip in there, but Trump gave everything that he wanted to Putin. Like, Trump literally handed him everything. So
I've never, ever in my wildest dreams imagined that a president would choose the president of Russia over their own FBI and CIA. That alone should have been the end of him. And Trump's like Boris, they both got Teflon. But I'm sort of looking at it and going, right, everything's weak right now. And it's like, well, if there's ever an opportunity to try and take this on and they're not going to retaliate, plus he's got most of Europe by the uncomfortable parts with the gas and electric, and oil.
Can I just say something about Putin and the US? I saw a clip yesterday of, I think it was from the Conservative Political Action Committee meeting, where there was a guy cheering on Putin, and there were members of the audience there, Republicans in the US, cheering Putin as well, literally saying, "Go Putin, go Putin." So the idea that it's not a stretch of the imagination now to look back at how a US president would choose Putin over his own security services. Before we continue, I just want to say thanks to Kate. Thank you so much for that super chat, Kate. Kay Muller, great to see you on once again. Thanks so much for that super chat as well. I just want to read out what he said. Let us not forget the war isn't popular in Russia as that the Kremlin ghoul thinks it is. Putin did it to cover his internal problems. Just my 2 cents. What do you think about that? And Veronica, thanks so much, Veronica, for that super chat, and Chris Murphy as well.
I have a bizarre story about that.
Go ahead.
I have a very bizarre story about that. I'm a member of JCI, that's Junior Chamber International, and we have chambers all over the world, including in Ukraine and Russia. And the Ukrainian president and the Russian president are friends. They know each other. They've gone to each other's conferences. They have meetings. They're in. We have like big voting blocks in JCI that like get together to like get stuff done. They're in the same voting block of like the other Eastern European countries that they're in. So they're friends. And the first the Russian president heard of it was when the Ukrainian president of JCI got a message from one of their local chambers saying Russian troops have entered our town.
Wow.
And then they sent that message to the Russian president, to Russian president. He had no idea at the time, what was going on. So, and we're just going to praise the fact that there's so many anti-war protests going on at the moment under intense resistance and oppression, really, from the Russian police. I mean, I've kept on saying it to all these, again, lefties who bizarrely have been standing for Russia all through the build-up to all this, almost right up to the invasion, some even still being incredibly pro-Russian up to this point, going, well, why don't you go and, protest in Russia, see how quickly you get, dragged off to a van and well, disappeared, full on to those, the people in Russia doing this. And also it's worth saying that the vast majority of Russian army combat strength is 16 to 21-year-olds. And
wow.
under a different government, these kids should be playing League of Legends. They should be beating me at like CS:GO. They should be, learning to be doctors, artists. So much things that they could be doing under a so much different government. And that is also the other tragedy that we've really got to look at. Yes, what's going on in Ukraine and happening to Ukrainian people is a tragedy, but the other tragedy is also what's going on with the people in Russia. And again, these people have ultimately been sent to fight a war that they very clearly, as we've said earlier, Russian troops saying, well, we don't want to be here, but they don't want to fight either. And by the way, just before I get that, by the way, 3 minutes ago, we've just had that Russian forces have struck what appears to be a Greek ship near Mariupol, and Greece has now committed to sending equipment to Ukraine.
Wow.
So that is literally fresh off the press, what's just happened.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really blowing up in his face here. I think his idea was, we'll just get into Ukraine, put in a puppet, and then move on, and the West won't respond because they haven't responded before.
I think you're right there with like Crimea. He took Crimea very quickly. They did like a false referendum where I think 90% or something of the people there wanted to join Russia. I think his plan was go via Belarus, take Kiev very quickly, which they look like they could do. I don't think it's as quick as they wanted it to be. Just run tanks through there, take Kiev, get rid of Zelensky, and put in someone else. Do an election, and then Yudansky. That was, I think, their big plan. But he didn't realize the Ukrainians would fight back. He conditioned. There was a lot of talk, actually. I think I watched a lot of Secular Talks videos because he was trying to cover this. And then he looked like a mug. And then he didn't when he was like, oh, there's stories of Russian troops pulling back. But then what happened was Putin didn't apparently condition his people for war because you need a big build-up. Even in like a state like Russia, you still need a build-up like we saw in for the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. You have to condition people to believe that we have to do this. Wars are expensive. You're going to send a lot of, young, particularly men, to die, and you have to condition people like that. And that didn't happen in Russia. And then the other problem was he told these dudes like who are younger than me, you're going to go fight neo-Nazis. You're going to liberate Russia. I saw a tweet from, I think it was the Russian embassy in the UK, where they said, "Oh, we're here to end the civil war." And I'm just like, no, like you're one side of it, mate. Like, stop it. So yeah, like. I think they conditioned think you're going to fight Nazis, they're oppressing people. And when that old lady went up to that soldier and said, oh, I'm going to put sunflower in your pocket, so at least you do something productive when you die. I think that dude was like, holy shit, like she ain't a neo-Nazi. He's like some old lady, like, tell me to get lost. And like you saw the guy's reaction. He was just like, I don't want to do this. Because you got to think, if this was like these guys going to invade, hardcore stuff, they'd be like, right, you're arrested, stuck in a van, gone. But he didn't do that. He just like, I don't want confrontation. With an old lady, this guy, strapped, he's got a weapon and everything. He was, cowering from an old lady, a pensioner probably. Yeah. Like that's, you don't see it, you don't read about that in wars really.
It's pretty rare.
And like
it's growing. The passive resistance is definitely growing.
And the idea that these are two kind of nation states that are very close to each other. There's a lot of like things about soldiers won't fire on their own people. They struggle to do that. And it happened in the 1905 revolution in Russia after Bloody Sunday, where the soldiers were like, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to shoot people I know. And, I think that it's a bit more distant, but I think it's a similar kind of ideal that, I'm not fighting neo-Nazis. These people don't want me here. I'm not liberating shit, I'm done, And so I think that's what's kind of happened. Like, Ukrainian tactics are spot on. They've got modern weaponry, very state-of-the-art stuff, javelin rockets and stuff. And the Russians are using stuff made probably before I was even born. So,
I'd just like to take this moment to let us take this moment of silence to pray to the patron saint of those javelin missiles. May they strike home true on their targets at this point, because they need it. Because militarily, when we look at what's going on in Ukraine, they've got two areas where you've got to look at. You've got what's going on in the east, and you've got what's currently going on in Kiev, where we're probably going to see in the next couple of days an attempt by Russian forces to surround the city. And after that, they can either move into the city or they will what's called invest the city, where they will just surround it and move on. We've seen very hard fighting on eastern Ukraine, where we've had forces coming in from the north of Ukraine, being stopped at a city up there. We've heard this morning that they are now bypassing that to go head on to Kiev. But the big problem is what's going to go on in the east, because you've had forces coming up from Mariupol. You've had, again, more forces coming from the north to essentially try and, pretty much surround the Ukrainian forces on there. And that currently is where the hardest fighting is going on to stop those surrounds. So if you follow anything about this war, pay very close attention to what is going on that Eastern Front, because if the Ukrainian soldiers hold on and manage to keep on that, and bear in mind, more and more support is coming their way. So the longer they hold on, the longer they hold the line and keep those Russian forces at bay and make them pay every single moment, the situation will turn more and more in their favor. Not only that, but the more the weather warms in Ukraine, the more the ground turns to absolute mud, especially in that area of Ukraine. It's just been, it's very icy and very, hard because of the ice. The second that starts to thaw, it turns into mud. And that causes an even bigger problem for the Russian forces, because then they cannot move their heavy artillery and their heavy equipment over land. They have to then rely on roads, which then makes it even more easier for the Ukrainians to defend on that point.
What about Ukrainian supply lines? Like, is there a risk to that? Because we're sending a lot of equipment. How is it getting to the front line? Because if it's cities like Kiev, that's okay. But if it's further out east, does anyone know if there are any issues about getting equipment out there? Because as we know, there's a lot of equipment. Almost every country in Europe is sending equipment to Ukraine. But are there concerns about supply lines?
The biggest point at the moment for that is trains. Trains at the moment are the quickest way to get stuff from, again, the west part of Ukraine to the eastern part. And so far, those trains, as that we've seen, are still running. I do not think they will probably be running for much longer, but the more that those lines keep open, the better. The other thing that we need to push for, if you are, again, in a European country and you want to try and do something, write to your elected representative and tell them to start sending vehicle support. They don't just need military weapon support, they need logistical help as well. So they will need trucks and vehicles for transportation. That is probably the next thing that we need to start pushing for, as well as sending them weaponry as well.
Okay.
Interesting.
Sorry. Just before you jump in, political, I just want to read out a comment from James, who said Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova all have separatist regions. I really think Moldova would be a target next if Ukraine falls. Maybe and sorry, we also have from Jimmy, United States Marine here. Wow, great to have you on, Jimmy. Thanks so much for that huge super chat. US was shifting to Pacific to contain China after the Cold War. All Europe did was shrink their armed forces. Europe was not willing to expand their armed forces. After Crimea, only shift forces, no new recruitment or expansion. So maybe we can talk a little bit about both of those issues. So what's next, and what about what we in the West have been doing since the Cold War? Do we need to reinvest in our militaries?
Wow. Interestingly enough, with the next point, just going back to sort of links into this, I know that Belarus is a bit of a nightmare for tanks because of the soil, which was a complication during World War II. The soil's got a fine level of sand in it, so not only can it turn muddy, but when that dries out as well, the sand can get into the engines of the tanks, which pumps up fuel consumption. It's one of the biggest problems that the Nazis had. And interestingly enough, that also links into a lot of this, because even Hitler in 1930 could see that there's going to have to be a conflict with the Soviet Union because Europe doesn't have resources. It doesn't have oil, it doesn't have gas, and not enough to, sort out the entire continent. So it's really interesting to see that it's almost 90 years since the 1930s. So 90 years, and Europe still hasn't twigged it needs to come off gas and oil. And that begs all sorts of questions. Like, if everyone can recognize that's an issue and the only place you can get it from is Russia, then you've got to disconnect from that. And the only way you can do that is finding other sources. And I think for talking about next and for the West, I think that's got to be a major priority. I will tell you some very good news, though. I know one or two physicists that are working in the project for the nuclear fusion reactor in Oxfordshire, and they've told me we could have that up and running within 15 to 25 years. and there's been the odd news report. I think China are also working on something. They've given out some good data as well. If there's unlimited electricity, we can suddenly start shutting off oil, gas, coal, and we can start actually moving into a very new period of human history, to be honest, because it seems like that can produce unlimited amounts of electricity, which is phenomenal. But we still got to wait 15 to 25 years before we can do that. And it's sort of like, great long term, but what do you do in the meantime when you've got a nut job in the East who's just up for causing chaos because he doesn't like... I mean, going back even further, I think the original point was, what's his motivation? Is it just because he doesn't like democracy because it's a direct threat to him? I mean, that could be a reason. And then that leads on to what do we do next? As for the military buildup, I'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts on that. I'd be curious to see what anyone else thinks. For the West, that is, like building up their military forces.
Big Manage, do you want to say something about that?
I think under the Tories we had massive cuts to the military as is. So I don't think, especially with Johnson saying last year that tank battles in Europe are, in the past. So I think, I'm not sure about other European countries. I think the French military is decent. I couldn't tell you about most of the other countries. But I think people have shifted away from seeing Russia as a threat. China's further away. And I think the idea of trade liberalization, that countries that trade together don't really fight with each other, but I suppose it doesn't take into account what if one of the countries attacks a third country? What do you do then? So I think that was probably the issue with that theory, which they didn't take into account. Because obviously, Germany has been paralyzed. Italy was paralyzed for a while there. We didn't want to cut off finances to Russia because they'd be in trouble. Finland probably might have been another one as well because they rely so much on Russian gas and oil. So, Europe should have got energy, should have focused on energy security a long time ago. With the militaries, though, it's a difficult one because I think we always banked on the Americans stepping in, and that was a key problem because the idea was Russia's, still a major power, not a superpower, but in terms of in Europe, it would be one of the strongest military forces. Now, looking at the Ukraine situation, you're like, are you still that guy? Are you still, the Cold War superpower that scared the life out of people in the world? They had like kids in America doing like nuclear drills where they would like hide under a desk or by a wall or something. Is Russia still that country? I don't know. So I think with countries doing more trade with Russia, I think countries in Russia, in Europe, like Germany, etc., thought, you know what, Russia's probably changed a corner here. The Soviet Union is over. Putin is a dodgy guy, but he's dodgy in Russia rather than anywhere else. And with a lot of that oligarch money flowing into certain European countries, the UK especially, I don't think we understood Russia as a threat. We saw Vlad as a very smart individual who wouldn't start a fight with Western European countries, and we were kind of wrong.
I think it also comes down to the issue of NATO. I think right. So again, bizarre story of how I've really come to start of following all this Ukraine stuff. Like a couple of weeks before all this was really just starting to kick off, I had a conversation. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but it's on my channel. A conversation with a conspiracy theorist. All about how he was saying, "Oh, this isn't going to happen. This is all just a play. This is all just somehow America is forcing Russia to invade Ukraine so that NATO doesn't expand eastward." Again, and a lot of the online left have fallen for this ridiculous narrative that, oh my God, we can't expand NATO any more eastward. This expansion of NATO in these Eastern European countries is legitimate security concerns for Russia. Well, ask yourself this question. Why did these countries join NATO to begin with? It was because they still had this very dangerous threat of, we might be invaded by Russia. Russia could use force on us to do this, so we're going to join NATO. And that's why you saw that NATO expansion. So the very idea that Putin is going to militarily use his diplomatic muscles to force Ukraine not to join NATO, when, bear in mind, the idea of Ukraine joining NATO had been pretty much settled. Like, it had asked, can we join NATO? As it is it right as a sovereign country to ask that question? But at the time, Germany and France had turned around and said, not at this moment. We're not interested in having you join. But now, this is only going to strengthen NATO. Like, the idea that Putin doing this is going to dissuade countries joining NATO. I mean, you've had the question asked in Sweden and Finland, should we be joining NATO? Those were countries who had agreed, like they were like neutral countries, but they had trigger agreements where they would go, if you invade us, we instantly join NATO.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this isn't going to weaken NATO as many leftists originally said that, oh, that's what Putin wants. You've seen the exact reason why all these Eastern European countries and Ukraine and Georgia want to join NATO. They are so worried about Russian aggression, and you've seen it played out in real time this week. And unfortunately, this is only going to get worse, I think, in Ukraine.
I think it's interesting. He's not threatening Estonia, which is an which is a NATO member, and it's right on his border. He's threatening Finland and Sweden, who are non-NATO members. So surely, if those people who make those arguments about expanding NATO, etc., should be like, well, NATO's on his border. What has Russia been invaded? I don't remember an invasion from Estonia. So it's just the argument doesn't make any sense. Fair enough, Ukraine's a bigger country, but if NATO were going to do something, they would have done so by now.
Yeah. It's funny. Just going back onto that point about sovereignty. It's funny how many of the Brexiteers and some of the left apparently have been harping on about Brexit being about sovereignty. But as soon as Ukraine shows that its sovereignty is towards Europe and NATO, they're like, "Oh, you're poking the Russian bear," and it's almost like it's very much history repeating. The more I look at this, I mean, you've got. It's very similar to World War II. You've got a KGB agent, Putin, who literally seems to have had like post-traumatic stress disorder and has a mental breakdown. It's already probably a sociopath or psychopath at that point because he's in East Germany. It collapses and he goes, right, well, it's collapsed. I don't like the fact that it's collapsed, so I'm going to go and become a politician. He learns all the tricks of the trade whilst he's a mayor, and then he just gets to be prime minister and then president. And then literally he's now going on an expansion thing. And I'm looking at this now and going, have we just done another era of appeasement instead of just telling the bully to get stuff? We've gone, okay, sort of get your point. You have Crimea. I mean, he's dumped chemical weapon and radioactive material in Salisbury and London. No one else has done that. ISIS hasn't done that. Al-Qaeda hasn't done that. And yet, our response is kick out some diplomats. I mean, it really begs all sorts of questions. And interesting, Big Madge, you mentioned about the Russian Revolution in 1905 and that the troops refused to fire on the crowd. I mean, the Russo-Japanese War, I wonder, again, if we go all the way back to the start, is he doing it because the economy's tanking in Russia and he needs a bit of a political boost? And that would then be what the Tsar did in 1905 with the Russo-Japanese War.
It's possible. To be fair, that's a pretty dodgy precedent because they lost that war really badly. Japan bullied them in the end, and the Russians surrendered, which hopefully we see again. But yeah, it's possible he's doing it for poll numbers. Apparently, this is his go-to whenever he does badly in the polls. He starts to fight with someone, and this time, he's picked a fight with the wrong people.
When he was prime minister. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
When he was prime minister, there was a lot of stuff. I'm trying to be careful in how I phrase this. I'd say there was suggested evidence that he had operated a false flag operation for Chechnya, and it is on record that local police near, I think it's in Chechnya, or it was near Chechnya. No, it was in a city in Russia, had found people acting very suspiciously, dropping in bags of stuff, and the local police managed to catch them in the act, arrest them. I think it was 5 people that were arrested, and basically found this huge bomb deposit that was being put into one of the buildings. And the FSB and I think the Prime Minister at the time, Putin, gave them a pardon, said, great work to the police, well done for capturing these people. But it was actually a training exercise. And it's like, why wouldn't you tell local police enforcement and other security services in the area that there's active training going on with live explosives? It's not fake explosives, it's live explosives. And you're starting to get a picture of a guy who, and it's following the pattern, which you said, Big Match. And it's very similar with a lot of dictators in history. They do the same stuff over and over again because they know it works. And so I was surprised he didn't do a false flag operation. I was surprised he didn't do a false flag operation of a bomb somewhere in Russia and then go, oh, it's the Ukrainians that have done this.
He did, though. He did that in the eastern area. He said, like, oh, they shelled some sort of area, like killed civilians. And he's like, we have to go in, we have to liberate people. He just made the big mistake of not conditioning people early enough before doing that. I think, Max, we've got a super chat, another one from Jimmy Lee. I think you're going to read it out.
I'll read that out. Yeah, supplies for Ukraine need to enter fast. The next objective, the next offensive will be strike from Lviv to Odessa, to the Odessa line, or Odessa amphibious offensive to Lviv. Then the only supply line is the Romanian Carpathian Mountains by mule or donkeys.
American humor there, I think.
Yes. Thanks for that, Jimmy. I just want to say something about the about NATO expansion and the question before about investing in European militaries. I think one of you had already said we're over reliant on the US, and if we look at the US budget, military budget, it's like $700 billion compared to even Russia's $60 billion a year. So the US is spending more than anyone else combined, like all other nations combined.
It's the next 10, I think.
The next 10 combined.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah. It's insane how much they are investing, and we have become reliant on that. But all you need is somebody like Trump to come along, who's unreliable, and I'm reading a lot online about how a lot of Republicans in the US are saying, well, Putin wouldn't have invaded if Trump had been in charge. And I don't buy that for a second. This is something that he's been planning for a long time. And as Political X said, he wants to resuscitate the Soviet Union. This is part of his plan. And it's in a sense it's indifferent to him who's president. And of course, we know what Trump is like, and there's no way that Trump would have done anything would have not, how can I say, stood up to Putin in any way.
Yeah. What he said was insane, anyways. Sorry.
I'll let you go. Yeah.
What you're saying was insane anyways. It's like the Soviets were wrong to let Ukraine kind of be a state. And I'm like, dude, it was 1920. Russia was like almost done out. Lenin was there. He literally ran on a campaign on peace, land and bread. Like Russia were desperate. They were going to fight Ukraine. They signed a really bad treaty with the Germans. And then they were bailed out by the rest of Europe essentially in that conflict. So the stuff he was saying was just crazy in the first place.
I don't even want to imagine like a world or what would be happening right now if Donald Trump had won like the American 2020 general election. I mean, you would have seen nothing. I mean, bear in mind, his entire presidency is just littered where he gave everything he wanted to Putin. He literally just rolled over and gave him everything. He completely undid all the sanctions that the US that Obama had put on him over Crimea, which ultimately has actually fueled this invasion. Trump has a lot to answer for his actions as president over this, and it doesn't. I mean, what if he was president? Would there even been a US response? Would there even be US sanctions? Who knows what Trump would have done during all this? It's insane to even think about how the inaction we would have probably been seeing from the US if Trump had been being president.
I think it'd be a mix of inaction and maybe even support for what's happening on the Russian side.
He's already said it, hasn't he? On he's been caught saying it. Like, well, he's a genius. Well done. Great work. It's just like, he's obviously been flipped. I'm happy to say it. He can sue me. I don't care. He's been flipped by the Russians. It's quite clear. I don't know what they've got. But if any Americans are watching, I've never ever heard of a president going over their own security services to a foreign leader and going, I believe the foreign leader over Americans. I've never heard of that. That's never happened before.
I don't think they've got anything. I think the guy's just an idiot. Like, fair enough, yeah. Because you got to look at it this way, right? The intelligence service said Russia interfered in the election. He's like, no, I won it on my own. I didn't need any help. So when you go by that logic, he's obviously going to say no to the FBI because everyone's like, oh, you believe the FBI on this thing? Why don't you believe him on this thing? So it's like, no, wrong. So it makes sense why he's.
I actually think it's a bit
more.
It's even worse than that. I think it's just corruption. Like if you look at the Saudis, when Trump became president-elect, he set up something like 200 companies in Saudi Arabia, and then as soon as he became president, he handed them billions of dollars of contracts. Because and also with Israel, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, or he was I don't know. He moved it. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem because they were willing to allow him to build apartments in Tel Aviv, I think it was, or something like that. So it's not. I don't think he's even political. It's just, I can make some money out of this. Then I'll do whatever these people ask, and to hell with the consequences.
In North Korea, he was like, "Oh, you got some nice beachside resorts here. You can build some nice stuff here. And I'm just like, are you stupid? Or what's wrong with you?" That's why I think even it wasn't just Europe that realized we can't rely on the Americans. It was the Japanese as well, because Japan were like, "Yo, they're doing like that the ballistic missiles testing. Like, do something." And then Trump was like, "You could build a very nice hotel here in North Korea. You could be like the South," and you're just like. I think that's why Japan were just like, because they've talked. I was watching some a Japanese person. They were making some content about it, like talking about remilitarizing Japan, because I think they might have realized that we actually can't rely on the Americans, and I think a lot of like other nation states should have realized that from the Trump era. Like, you can't rely on them because they're going to elect a lunatic. Trump still has around like I think 33% of support of Americans. Like, how? What do you believe in this guy? Like 20%, okay, maybe, but a third. 1 in 3?
63% of white women voted for him, and you're just like, he's literally a pervert. He's literally a pervert. He's literally going around. He's on court documents with Epstein. Like, why would you vote for him? He's literally sexually assaulted women.
And QAnon are like, who's going to stop the paedophiles?
Yeah. Just to give an update, by the way, Turkey, Erdogan in Turkey has basically said that if Russia doesn't start ceasefire talks, they're going to block off the Dardanelles. They're going to block that straight to Russian shipping,
finally,
which will be a very, very big step forward on that.
What an arc this is! What an arc this is, man.
Yeah. Also, there has been this from the Ukraine Deputy Defense Minister. He's claimed that Russian forces have lost over 4,300 servicemen. However, it is not possible at the moment for the Guardian to immediately verify this figure. Also, Myanmar also said on Facebook that Russian troops have lost about 146 tanks, 27 aircraft, and 26 helicopters. And that's been reported by Reuters as well.
Did you?
This is interesting. The Economist has reported that despite being outgunned and outnumbered, Ukraine has inflicted more casualties in 24 hours than Russia suffered over 8 years of engagements in Syria.
Wow.
Good job to the Ukrainian army doing this. And like I said just a few moments ago, the longer they hold the line against Russia, the more support they're going to get, the more material they're going to get. Maybe the NATO reaction force has been activated. Maybe it goes into Ukraine and says, we are going to defend the sovereignty of Ukraine. I don't know if we'll get there.
Yeah, that's my fear, is that we won't get to that stage. That NATO will stay neutral in a sense.
That's quite interesting, because there is a super chat from someone called Claire Sweet, because it didn't come up on the bar, where she asked, do you think we'll see EU, UK, or USA boots on the ground? I don't think, not during this Ukraine conflict. Maybe if he invades a NATO state, definitely. Maybe if he goes, maybe if he takes Ukraine and then moves on to Sweden or Finland, then possibly. But I don't think at the moment we'll see it. Not for Ukraine, anyways, which is unfortunate.
I just want to just before I let Bowler Hatman in, I just want to thank some people for their super chats. Heret, thanks so much for that super chat, €20. Dr. Johan, thanks so much for that super chat as well. Claire Sweet. So I just see Claire's now. About and then we also have
my hat to all the people donating.
Thumbs up for me.
Tugger Forlock vote for Rees-Mogg. Lawrence, thank you so much for that super chat as well. Surely the best response from everyone involved would be to implement the hardest sanctions possible, regardless of the consequences. So, Bullerhat, you wanted to jump in.
I'll just follow up from that last comment. I absolutely agree. The sanctions should go hard and they should go deep and literally destroy the Russian economy, because that will ultimately end Putin probably as well when that happens. The other immediate threat, as we said, discussing the NATO thing, the immediate threat is to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. Those three countries were explicitly mentioned in Putin's very rambly, almost hour-long speech about restoring the Russian Empire. And needless to say, remember, the justification for his invasion of Ukraine is to help defend, these Russian people in Ukraine. But remember, this one of the justifications is the whole language thing. Well, remember, in the Baltic countries, as far as I'm aware, they want to help their own language flourish as well. So they've said, well, in schools, we're not teaching in Russian anymore. We're going to teach our own, language. That's the exact same justification that Putin has given for, well, we're going to go in and defend these Russian people. That's why ever since, again, Crimea, the danger has been, and those countries have been very much on invasion alert ever since then. So I think, if there's going to be any more movement by Russian forces, it will be those three countries. And I've said that Silesia gap between Kaliningrad and Belarus is easily the most worrying point about all this. Again, we'll have to see what happened. But also another point that we have to bring up, the president of Azerbaijan, after that speech, had to phone Putin up and say, oh, by the way, you said about retaking rightful Russian territory. Do you mean us? And Putin had to give him reassurances that it didn't mean him. Yeah.
He's like, definitely not your country.
Do you reckon he's terminally ill? He's got like 5 or 10 years to live, so he's just going, let's go full throttle and grab it all before I die or something.
That's interesting, because I think with him being, he saw the fall of Russia when he was younger, no doubt. And I think that he's 70. A lot of people don't realize how old he is. And a lot of politicians that have been, like leaders of countries, they do obsess over legacy a lot. You notice that with Obama as well. Like, he's obsessed with his legacy and how he'll be like portrayed by history. So I think maybe Vlad sees himself, or wants to see himself as the one who kind of started the rebuilding of the Russian Empire. And so I think that's why he's done this, because he thought, go into Ukraine, get a quick win, no one's going to do anything. Anyone makes a move, I'm cutting the gas and oil off, real quick. So he thought, no one's going to do anything. Do a false election, put a puppet in or whatever. Maybe just run it himself. I wouldn't be surprised if he thought he could do that. Because I think
but we also
the old Politburo did it.
We also have to remember the significance of Kiev as a place in Russian feeling. You know, it's allegedly the original Rome of the Russian people. So it has significant. It's extremely significant to their history. So the idea of I'm going to be the one who will bring it back. You know, I'll turn it Russian once again.
No, very much. You know, the economy's not doing well, and you know, it's a form of power. Just like how Britain looks to its past. I think he was like, you know, we could be that country again. The West is divided. They're not going to do anything. Well, it's going to be an easy win. That's probably how he thought it was going to go, and he didn't realize like Ukraine don't like you like that. You know, he might have been misled because I was going to make this point earlier because the civil war has been going on for so long in Ukraine. Maybe he underestimated the resolve of the Ukrainian people because they've been under civil war for like since 2014. I'm going to say that's 8 years. So he probably thought this Ukraine military is pretty useless because that's a long time to have a civil war. They could barely take on some Russian separatists. So maybe he thought it'd be easy win. Didn't realize it's all hands on deck. You know, you've got the goddamn former heavyweight champion of the world. The mayor of Kiev, he's out there. He's ready to die. Apparently, the current champion's there as well. I don't know if that's true. Alexander Usyk. Apparently, he's there as well. And I'm just like, he did not realize the people don't like him. You know, and that's the thing he kind of miscalculated the most. He wasn't going in as a liberator. He was going in as an oppressor. And, you know, it's about time they realize that. And once the Russian military do, I think that's when we can see, you know, especially the younger soldiers say, no, I don't want to do this. I'm going home. That's when things will change.
Yeah, I think the turn of thoughts about what's going to happen in the future to Ukraine. I think this, if you look at like other nationalist movements or like how countries have created like their own national mythos that has like made them stronger together as a nation. This is one of those moments for Ukraine. This is absolutely one of these moments. You're going to get stories told about like the guy who sacrificed himself to blew up a bridge to stop the advance. He's been given the Ukraine's highest military honor I think just yesterday. You've got the fighter pilot ace, the ghost of Kiev. I think as far as I'm aware, he's up to 7 confirmed kills. That is the first like fighter pilot ace in this century. Good on them. And these stories are going to be told for years to come. And the idea that Putin said he wanted to bring back the Ukrainian people into the fold. Again, he's referred to like the Ukrainian people as the little lost Russian tribe. So the idea that this is going to bring Ukraine like back towards Russia and turn them away from Europe is completely false. This is if anything going to turn them even more towards being European and further away from being Russian.
Yeah, going to be interested to see how much it unifies everything because I think it's going to bring. I don't want to bring it up too much, but I think this is going to bring a lot of questions about Brexit. If the far right aren't backing the British and NATO and going against a dictator, you've got questions, but then again, I guess you could reflect that on Oswald Mosley. I'm aware of the time. We've only got 5 minutes left.
I just want to say thanks to Ray Smith for that super chat. Sorry, go ahead, Political X.
I just want to finish off, because we only got 6 minutes left, talking about Anonymous, which I think is also quite an interesting galvanizing thing. That is literally individuals across the world hammering at the Russian state, and it looks like they're doing more to damage it than pretty much. I'd like to debate about whether or not that's more damaging than what we're doing with the sanctions. Because he must have prepped for the sanctions. He knew that was going to happen. Every military analyst would have told him that. But I bet you he hasn't prepped, and I'm certain he hasn't prepped for all the stuff that's going on with the hacking that's taking place across this entire country. Any thoughts or stories from anyone about that?
We've seen some stories about how the Anonymous have broadcast Ukrainian, have taken over Russian TV and broadcast Ukrainian songs and also imagery from the war that maybe many Russians don't get to see.
That's important because that's one of the things that turned the Vietnam War when people were like, oh, this is not going very good. The Viet Cong are no joke. So I think that's one of the things actually. I mean, if they see the video of the old lady and the soldier, I think that's gonna change a lot of minds potentially in Russia.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, the guy getting run over by a tank. and then surviving.
Oh, that was insane! I don't know how he survived that. That was crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how he'd survive that either. I mean, if you've seen the video, the tank literally swerves over his car and then reverses over him. And when I saw that video, I thought he's gone. There's no way he survived that. But my word, he is probably the most luckiest man on the entire planet to survive that.
That would be a great advert for a decent car that protects everything, protects you from everything.
Yeah, I don't know what make that car manufacturers, but it can survive a tank. It can survive anything. I was going to say the only major concern. There's another super chat from Jimmy Lee. I'll have to read that out as well. But my only concern is does Ukraine have the kind of human, the manpower to carry on, because they've conscripted so many people. Like, you've got men who are just trying to leave with their families, and they're like, no, you got to stay and fight. And that's my major concern: is do they have the the people to carry on this kind of conflict?
Yeah, when I've looked at it again, I explained sort of the military situation, what's going on. You've got to keep an eye on what's going on in the east. If those if the northern eastern front and the southern eastern front do start to fall, then that is probably where we start to see some trouble for the Ukrainian military, because there'll be a massive surround of their armies, certainly in the east. And it unfortunately really is just a matter of time, because Russia will just throw bodies at them. They've got that ability to be able to do that. Ukraine doesn't. And as I've said before, the longer Ukraine holds on, every minute, every hour, every day they buys them more time for more equipment, more political pressure to be put on Russia. It's they are holding the line so well, and we've just got to hope that they hold it for as long as possible. But if you look into what happened in Georgia, it was 5 days before the Russian army gave up and then just said, right, well, ceasefire.
Wow.
And we are 3 days, I think, at this point.
Yeah, 3 days.
Did Condoleezza Rice land in the Georgian capital with an American warship off the coast and an American warplane in the nearby airport, and she stayed there during the conflict? Is anyone aware of this?
No.
Something that's been kicking around on Twitter, and I've never heard of it as a story. But it makes you wonder, is that what's necessary? We start putting representatives in the town of Kiev and go, right, we put citizens in there from America, Britain, Europe, the world. Is that what it's going to take to get him to back off? I mean, imagine if he started killing prime ministers and presidents that were based there. I know it sounds extreme, but there is historical precedent for that. If Condoleezza Rice's situation was verified, and other historical examples,
I think that would be really irresponsible to do that. I think that'd be grossly irresponsible, especially I don't know what the hell the Americans were thinking when they pulled a stunt like that, if they did. But could you imagine, if one of our ministers, you'd have to go in there at that point. You'd have to do something, and you might not have the backing of other countries. I guess if America does it, it's different. But if it was like, could you imagine, like, if they killed off, I don't know, like Ben Wallace or something? I'm sure half the population would be like, who's that guy? What was he doing there? So I don't think that's a good idea.
Just another quick update, by the way. We were talking this about earlier about countries increasing their spending. Germany has now just committed, where is it? 100 billion euros. It has now increased its budget by. That takes it over the 2% spending of its limits. Countries are going to be probably investing more in the military now.
So Putin, instead of actually creating this unity in NATO, has strengthened NATO.
I mean, he's united. I mean, Kazakhstan won't back him, which, he went there recently. Goddamn Erdogan's gone against him. And then you've got, there was a third country. The Taliban told him to chill. The goddamn Taliban have said, yo, you need to negotiate, man. Is it cool, Max? Because I think Jimmy just dropped I'll
just read out Jimmy's chat. For the offensive, you need 3 times the number of defenders. What the UKR have is the terrain knowledge and the home field advantage. Urban combat, you want 5 to 10 in numbers of resources. Attackers always suffer more losses than defenders. Yes. And we've seen pictures of individuals, civilians making Molotov cocktails. One Molotov cocktail dropped from an apartment, a third floor in an apartment, can do a lot of damage to a number of soldiers in an open top vehicle. So
there's a military analyst called John Spencer on Twitter who's been firing out tweets to try and get the Ukrainians to follow his advice. And he specializes in urban warfare. So that's been quite interesting. One of the things he said was drop a Molotov cocktail at the back of the tank, the engine, and he'll knacker it. And you're almost like, have they actually developed it in such a way that it can't even take a Molotov cocktail?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's not even how it's just united people like that. You know, imagine like a world where you see like dictators, the goddamn Taliban saying, "Yo, stop it." You know, even I think the Chinese Communist Party are like, "Yeah, nah, I don't know if we're gonna be there for you, bro." Like, yeah, man, maybe you done goofed, son. You know, maybe you should back the hell up because yeah, like it's just wild. The Taliban, Erdogan. Saying, yeah, we might cut off the sea if you're not careful, son. Yeah, you best be stopping this. You know, it's just wild. Imagine like you've gone so far. Like imagine like even like Prince of Saudi's like, yeah, nah, bro. You know, I know we're bombing the hell out of Yemen, but what you're doing there is wrong. Crazy.
I mean, in terms of allies in like just Europe, Viktor Orban's turned against him. Like his only ally in Europe has been Serbia. Serbia has been the only European country to come out and actually say, we're supporting Russia on this.
Be Belarus as well would be the only other one, I think. Belarus and Serbia then.
Yeah, Belarus. Yeah.
Have they got protests in their capitals?
Yeah. Okay, guys. So we'll have to call it a day for today. I hope everyone. Thanks so much to everyone who's come on. Thanks to the guests as well. So next week we're going to have it at the same time. Different guests probably. We'll see how things go. Probably a different topic, maybe, or the same topic. We'll see how things progress. So thanks to everyone for the super chats. When we have them all collected, we'll publish them about the charities that we're supporting, Ukrainian charities. So thanks once again. Thanks to everyone who's come on. Thanks to everyone here. Have a great Sunday. And once again, solidarity